With our image plane created, we're ready to actually model the y-glass. This is done through a process known as a surface of revolution. You draw a curve, and that curve then gets spun around an axis to define a surface. Maya has a couple different options for curves. You have Bezier curves, which are the ones you're probably familiar with from a program like Illustrator or Photoshop. And Maya also has something called NURBS curves, which is non-uniform rational B-splines or basis splines. NURBS are the more fundamental type of curve in Maya. And they're also the type of curve that's found more commonly in most 3D programs. I did some experimentation to prepare for this course, and I determined that the NURBS curves were going to be a better option because they're more reliable. The Bezier curves in Maya actually still have bugs. They were introduced years ago, but there's still some issues. And rather than run into those issues in this lesson, I opted to use the NURBS curves. And NURBS curves are probably a better choice for the lesson too, because they're probably less familiar to you. Bezier curves are pretty obvious. You probably use them in Illustrator and so on. So let's learn something new. NURBS curves. And we can find that in the Create menu here. Create, CV Curve Tool. So you'll see CV Curve Tool and EP Curve Tool. These will both create the same type of NURBS curve. It just gives you a different method for creating them. I prefer the CV Curve Tool because the CV, or control vertex, is the actual fundamental unit of a NURBS curve. So that's sort of the more real of the two. An EP, or edit point, is actually the same thing, but when you move an EP or edit point, you're moving multiple CVs at the same time. So it's kind of weird and not intuitive. I definitely would recommend using the CV Curve Tool. Okay, now if I just draw out, for example, in the top view here, just so you can get a feel for how this works, and then we'll do a proper model. But I can just click, and I'm creating points. These are known as knots, or control points, or control vertices. When I click the fourth time, now I see a white line, and that's the actual curve. For a standard NURBS curve, you have to have at least 4 control vertices for that line to exist. I'll keep clicking around. And if I want to complete this, I'll press the Enter key on the keyboard. And now I've got a NURBS curve. If I get in close on it, let's tap the space bar and dolly in a little bit with Alt and right mouse. You'll see some segmentation here. This is just a display approximation. The curve is actually perfect. We could actually slice this curve up as finely as we wanted to. There's no actual limitation on the fineness of that curve. It's just being displayed in a really rough fashion by default. If you want to see a better approximation of that curve, you can press the 2 key on your keyboard, and that'll give you a medium display smoothness. Or you can press the 3 key, and then you'll get a fine display smoothness. 1 is rough, 2 is medium, and 3 is fine. Okay, so that's how you work with NURBS curves. I'm going to delete that one. It's currently selected and highlighted in bright green. Press the delete key on the keyboard, and then go back to the front view. Tap the space bar, move the mouse, and just hover the cursor over the front view and tap the space bar again. And move and size that up using the standard Alt middle and Alt right hotkeys. And now we're ready to draw this. A couple things you need to know. For a revolve, the curve needs to be built exactly at the center of the world here. You can't have your image plane offset. It needs to be precisely lined up. And when you build the curve, it needs to be an open curve that doesn't join back up to itself. And the first and last points on the curve have to be exactly on this axis line, which means they will have an X position of 0. And if those rules are not observed, then you're going to get terrible results. Your object is going to have holes in it, or even worse, it's going to have self-intersecting surfaces that pass through each other, and it's going to be horrible. So in order to control this in Maya, you need to know that the curve needs to be exactly at the center of the world, and there's no mercy around this. And you can't do it any other way. It has to be done this way. To make that a little bit easier, you can use snapping to the grid. That's this button up here, little magnet with a grid. But if you turn that on, you're going to be creating all of your points on the grid. What you probably want to do is just create some of the points on the grid. And to do that, you'll use a shortcut, which is X. So I'm going to turn that off again. And if I hold down the X key on the keyboard, you can see that that's lighting up just temporarily. So we can turn snapping on and off while we build our curve. The other thing that you need to know about NURBS curves is that they're very different from Bezier curves like you're used to from Illustrator and Photoshop. Bezier curves will freak out and have really strange results if you have 2 points in the same place. But NURBS curves really commonly expect you to have 2 points in the same place. That's how you define the sharpness of the curve. If you have 2 points right on top of each other, you'll have a sharper transition there. And if you have 3 points exactly on top of each other, you will have a hard corner. Okay? So again, that's very different to what you might be used to, but once you know those things, then actually NURBS curves are easier to use in Maya than Bezier curves, and they don't have as many issues. All right, so we're going to create our CV curve. Create CV curve tool. And once again, I want the first and last points to be exactly on this axis line. And to ensure that happens, I can hold down the X key. And I can click here once. And now you'll see I've got a little yellow square there. That's my first control vertex. But I actually want to have 2 of them. So I'll click a second time. And now I've got 2 in that location. And likewise out here, I'll go out here and still holding down X, I'll click once and then give a pause and then click a second time. And that way I create a perfectly straight line there. That's how we do it with NURBS. If you want to have a perfectly straight line, then you need to double up those control points. You need to have at least 2 control points on top of each other. All right, now I can relax a little bit. I can let up on that X key and I'm no longer snapping. And I can just start creating points sort of freehand here. Okay, so just kind of following that outline. And I'm going to come up to the top here, and I want a sharp corner there. So I'm going to click once, and then give a pause, a little heartbeat there, and then click a second time. It is important that you wait. Maya is going to test your patience. If you click twice really quickly, you won't get 2 points. You have to click and then wait a half second and then click a second time. So I can do that again here. 1, 2. And now I've got 2 points there. That's how I get a sharp transition. All right, and I need to draw the interior surface of that wine glass as well. When I come down here to the end, this is going to be my last point, and it needs to have an X value of 0 here. Let's look at what happens if I don't hold down the X key and I don't snap to the grid. Let's say I click out here once and then a second time. And now I got 2 points there. Those points are not in the right place, but I can easily put them at an X value of 0. Okay, so I've built out basically the points that I need. And now I can press the Enter key. And I've got my line. If I click off of it, we can see it a little bit better there. So there's my line. I want to clean it up. First thing I want to do is fix this issue here. Let's get a little bit closer here with Alt and right mouse. And to move individual points, we need to do something called component editing. We want to go into component mode. In Maya, part of an object is a component. I want to select that line and go into Control Vertex Component mode. The easiest way to do that is to hold down the right mouse button directly over the line. And you'll get this pop-up menu, which in Maya is known as the marking menu. And choose Control Vertex. And now I'm in Control Vertex Component mode. And I can select a single point here. And I can grab the Move tool or press the W key and I can move that point around and I can control the shape of the curve. Cool. Now this one, as I said, these guys need to have their position exactly at an X value of 0. There are 2 points there, not just 1. To make sure that I select them both, I want to drag a rectangle around them. And now both of those control vertices are selected. And I've got the Move tool active. And to move them to an X value of 0, up on the status line, I can open up this very last section of the status line, and I can type in values here for X, Y, and Z. So just go over here, click in X, put in a 0, and press Enter. And it moves the selected control points to an X position of 0, right on that line. And now I can move this up and down. I'm just not moving it side to side. All right, cool. So now you're just going to move all these points around in order to trace the shape of the wine glass the best you can, realizing that the points will usually lie off the curve. Almost always, in fact. If I want to move all of this stuff down, I can select all of these and then just move them down. One thing I do want to point out is that this is not a blueprint. This photograph is actually a photograph. And because of that, the base of the wine glass has got some perspective distortion or foreshortening on it. And it's not flat at the bottom here. So we don't want to actually draw a line here that's curved at the bottom. We need to be smarter than that. It needs to be flat on the bottom. Okay, so you can move these to the side and try to trace that shape. And we have to use our imagination a little bit here because we don't have an actual blueprint or orthographic image of the wine glass. All we've got is this photograph, which has got some perspective distortion in it. All right, so I'm not going to do the whole process here. You can do that on your own, but I will show you just one or two little things. If you want to add or remove points on a NURBS curve, there's a process for that. If you want to remove points, it's really easy. You just select a point and press delete on the keyboard, and it gets erased. Notice that it will change the shape of the curve. If I want to undo that, I can just press Z on the keyboard, and that is undo. To insert points is a more involved process. It's a multi-step process. You have to go into a component mode called curve point mode. And a curve point is not technically a component at all. It's an arbitrary location on your curve. Right-click on the curve and choose Curve Point. And then you can click anywhere, or even click and drag anywhere, and you can position that curve point. And wherever you release your mouse, that's where you're going to create your new control vertex, or your actual editable component. All right? So let's say I wanted to create another one just here. So I'll click there and it's selected. With that edit point now highlighted, I want to go into the menus. Up here is a pull-down list known as the menu set. And I can choose from different modular sets of menus because there's too many menus to all fit on the screen at once. So I can click on that and I want to choose surfaces. Within surfaces, I want to go into Edit Curves, Insert Knot. And a knot, once again, is a synonym or a word that means control vertex. Right, so I'll issue that command. Maya has dropped me back into object mode. In order to access that control vertex, I'll have to right-click once again and go back into control vertex mode. And now I have a point. And that point wasn't there before. Another thing that's useful to know is that when you add a knot or a control vertex, it usually doesn't get added exactly at the location you chose. It gets placed near that location such that the shape of the curve will be preserved. So Maya places priority on maintaining the shape of the curve, and it will position the new control vertex wherever it's needed, near where you chose, but not exactly at the same place that you chose. Okay, so I'm going to work on this a little bit more, and in the next movie we'll look at actually revolving this into a surface.